All right, let's dive into a case that I think has captivated a lot of people for a very long time. A case that, well, it's just got so many layers to it. It's February 2005 in Wichita, Kansas. And there's this collective sigh of relief because Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, he's finally behind bars. But here's the thing, right? This guy who terrorized Wichita for decades, he wasn't some shadowy figure lurking in the alleys. He was hiding in plain sight.
Yeah, a family man.
A Boy Scout leader.
Church president.
Like, how is that even possible?
It really is one of the most unsettling aspects of this case, isn't it? This stark contrast between the monster and the mask he wore for all those years.
And that's exactly what we're going to try to untangle today, right? Like, how did this seemingly ordinary guy become a serial killer?
We're going to be using Rader's own words from his confessions, from his writings, even accounts from people who knew him, like trying to piece together this puzzle.
All right, so let's start at the end with that floppy disk. Can you set the scene for us?
Sure. So it's 2004, and Rader, he's basically playing this cat and mouse game with the police, right? He's sending them letters, he's leaving them clues, and he gets this, well, I guess you could say, brilliant idea.
Oh, no.
He wants to know if they can trace him if he sends them a floppy disk. So he actually asks them.
No way, he asks them.
He did. And the police are like, yeah, absolutely, we could totally trace a floppy disk.
I mean, they weren't lying.
Exactly. And Rader, he actually believed them.
Yeah.
I mean, think about the arrogance there. He thinks he's outsmarted them.
So what happens?
Well, he sends the disk. The police, they're able to recover a deleted file that links back to Christ Lutheran Church. And guess who the last person to modify that file was?
Dennis Rader.
Dennis Rader.
Yeah.
Talk about a digital downfall.
It's almost unbelievable. Okay, but let's back up, way back to Rader's childhood. You know, growing up in Wichita, fishing, hunting with friends. Sounds pretty normal, right?
Surface level, yeah, it does. But even Rader himself admitted to this, like fascination with animal cruelty when he was a kid. He was particularly fixated on how his grandmother killed chickens.
Oh, wow.
But it wasn't just the killing, it was the control he was fascinated by. That power over life and death. And then you have, the fetish for women's underwear. It's a common thread we see in a lot of serial killer profiles.
Yeah.
It's like a warning sign that often gets overlooked or dismissed.
And then there's that disturbing incident, I think he was around 11 or 12, where he's humiliated by a teacher. And what does he do? He goes to her house later that day with a rope, like peering through the window, watching her. And while he's watching her, he ties the rope tightly around himself.
It's a pretty chilling foreshadowing of what's to come. This blending of violence, voyeurism, and sexual deviancy. It's all intertwined.
It's like this early warning system, but no one's picking up the signal.
Right, and tragically, it all culminates in January 1974 with the Otero family murders.
Oh, man. Yeah, this is where it gets real.
The police walk into this horrific scene at the Otero home. It's a meticulously planned execution. The parents, the two children, none of them spared.
What strikes you about this first set of murders?
The methodical nature, the planning involved. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was a ritual. And there's evidence that suggests Rader took his time, like really prolonged the suffering of his victims. He suffocated 9-year-old Joey Otero with a plastic bag, and he positioned himself so he could watch the boy die.
Oh, my God. That's brutal.
It's incredibly disturbing. And then they find 11-year-old Josephine in the basement, hanged. The level of cruelty is it's almost beyond comprehension.
And it doesn't stop there. Just a few months later, Rader attacks 21-year-old Kathy Bright and her brother Kevin.
Right. A brutal struggle. Kathy's killed, but Kevin, despite being shot in the head, survives.
Wow. A miracle.
Later, Rader would confess that he would have killed Kevin too if he had brought all of his, and I quote, stuff.
His stuff.
Yeah. Referring to his tools, his torture kit. It's like these instruments were essential to the job for him.
Dehumanizing his victims. Seeing them as objects.
Exactly. And, he kept a hit kit, detailed notes. It was all very meticulous, almost like a twisted project he was perfecting.
And you know what gets me? When other men were initially suspected in the Otero murders, Rader wasn't relieved. He was frustrated.
He wanted the credit. He craved the recognition. He wanted everyone to know it was him. And that's when we see the emergence of BTK, right? He starts communicating with the police, the media, sending them letters, poems, drawings, all designed to instill fear.
Taunting them, playing this sick game with the entire city.
Yeah. And all while living this seemingly normal life.
Yeah.
Which I think leads us to the biggest question. How did he keep these two worlds separate for so long? I mean, it's almost like he had this switch he could flip, you know?
Mhm.
Like one minute he's leading a Boy Scout meeting, the next he's stalking a victim.
It's mind-blowing, really. You have to wonder if those, like, those normal activities, the Boy Scouts, the church, were they, I don't know, a way for him to, like, maintain this facade?
Oh, absolutely. It was all part of the mask, right? The perfect cover.
Yeah.
He even admitted to engaging in, well, this is disturbing, autoerotic asphyxiation while he was supposed to be supervising scouts.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah. Hard to wrap your head around that one.
It really highlights that compartmentalization, right? Like this
Yeah.
ability to just shut off any kind of empathy or remorse.
It's a classic psychopathic trait, the ability to just to view people as objects.
So then you have this long period of silence after the murder of Maureen Hedge in 1985. BTK just vanishes for like what, 13 years?
Yeah. It's one of the more perplexing aspects of the case. What was he doing all that time?
Yeah, was he like suppressing his urges or did something else happen?
Well, some theories suggest he might have been, preoccupied with other parts of his life, his family, his job.
Mm.
Maybe those things acted as a sort of temporary dam, holding back the darkness.
But that dam breaks again in 2004, and BTK is back. This time even bolder, even more manipulative. He starts leaving these boxes, serial killer boxes he called them.
Oh, yeah, filled with all sorts of disturbing stuff. Dolls posed like his victims, jewelry. He was taunting the police, enjoying the attention.
It was like a sick game to him.
It was. And, he almost got away with it, if it wasn't for that floppy disk.
Talk about a monumental blunder. I mean, can you imagine the shock when the police finally show up at his door? They unmask BTK, and it's this seemingly normal guy everyone knows.
The reactions from those who knew him they're just unbelievable. His classmates described him as quiet, unassuming. They said he was the last person they'd ever suspect.
It's terrifying to think that evil can be so unremarkable, so ordinary.
And you know what's even more disturbing? Rader's demeanor. During his confession, during his trial,
Yeah, he was just so matter-of-fact about it all.
he was almost boastful as
Yeah.
he described these horrific acts. Like he was talking about, I don't know, fixing a leaky faucet or something.
No remorse whatsoever.
None. And then you have the victims' families at the plea hearing. Their words are they're heartbreaking. The pain, the anger, the desperate need for justice.
It's a powerful reminder that behind every true crime story, behind every headline, there are real people whose lives have been shattered. So then, I guess the question becomes, what creates a monster like Dennis Rader? Was he born evil? Or was it, I don't know, something that happened, something that shaped him?
The nature versus nurture debate. It's a question that has plagued us for centuries. Some experts say there might be a biological predisposition to violence.
Like a genetic component.
Possibly. Others believe it's environmental factors. Childhood trauma, social isolation, exposure to violence.
Like that incident with the teacher.
Exactly. It's like this blueprint for his later crimes.
And then there's the whole idea of orgasmic conditioning, right? This idea that deviant arousal patterns they get strengthened through repetition.
Right. So in Rader's case, those early experiences of cruelty, control, voyeurism, those things might have become intertwined with his sexual gratification.
Wow. That's a disturbing thought.
It is. And you know what else is interesting? Rader actually studied criminal justice in college.
Wait, are you serious?
Yeah. Makes you wonder if he was studying to learn how to get away with it all.
Chilling.
He wanted to be one step ahead of the law. He blended in, deceived an entire community for over 30 years.
It's a stark reminder that evil can hide anywhere. It can wear the mask of normalcy.
And that's one of the most unsettling truths about this case. We might never truly know what lurks beneath the surface.
It's just wild to think about, right? Like Dennis Rader baking pies for his neighbors one minute and then meticulously planning a murder the next.
It really challenges our perception of what evil looks like. We tend to think of it as this overt, monstrous thing, but so often it's concealed behind a mask of ordinariness.
And that's what makes this case so unnerving. It forces us to confront the fact that darkness can exist anywhere, even in the hearts of people we think we know.
It really does raise those fundamental questions about human nature, doesn't it? Like, can we ever truly grasp what drives someone to commit such horrific acts?
Is it a choice? Some kind of moral failing? Or is it something more, I don't know, more ingrained?
It's a question that has puzzled criminologists and psychologists for centuries.
Mm-hmm.
And as we've discussed, there are no simple answers.
Right, we talked about those potential biological factors, like maybe some people are just, I don't know, predisposed to violence.
Yeah, the idea of a genetic component. But then you have to consider the environmental factors, too. The impact of trauma, isolation, exposure to violence. Those things can't be ignored.
And those serial killer boxes that Rader started leaving, were those like a sign of him, I don't know, losing it, becoming more reckless?
That's an interesting point. Some experts believe it could be a sign of grandiosity, like a need to prove he was smarter than everyone else. But others see it as desperation, a cry for attention.
Either way, it backfired spectacularly. But it does raise those questions about the media's role in all of this. We talked about Rader's obsession with attention, how he used the media to amplify his terror. So how do we report on these crimes responsibly? How do we not feed into that desire for notoriety?
It's a delicate balance, for sure. It's this constant struggle between informing the public and avoiding the unintentional glorification of these individuals and their acts.
Yeah, it's a tough line to walk. And with social media, it's become even more complicated.
Absolutely. The information spreads so quickly, it's hard to control the narrative.
So I guess it comes down to this. We all have a responsibility, not just journalists, but everyone, to be mindful of how we consume and share information, to not let the sensationalism overshadow the real human cost of these crimes.
To remember the victims, to
No.
center their stories, to honor their memory, that's crucial.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember this case, as horrific as it is, it's not unique. There are likely others out there who are struggling with these dark urges who might be on a similar path.
And that's a sobering thought,
Mm.
but it's also a call to action.
Yeah.
What can we do as individuals, as a society, to prevent these tragedies from happening?
It starts with awareness, right? Like
Yeah.
recognizing the warning signs, understanding that this darkness can exist in anyone.
Exactly. We need to foster empathy, create a culture where people feel comfortable seeking help, where mental health is prioritized.
We need to build communities where people feel seen and heard and supported, communities that actively resist darkness and choose light.
That's beautifully said.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into the case of Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, I think we're left with this profound sense of unease. It's a reminder how fragile life can be and how close that darkness really is. But I think we're also left with a sense of hope. We can learn from these tragedies. We can recognize the warning signs, and we can work together to create a world where these kinds of horrors are less likely to happen.
A world where empathy triumphs over fear, where understanding leads to healing. That's what we should all strive for.
And to our listeners, we leave you with this. What can you do in your own life, in your own community, to promote understanding, to foster empathy, to create a world where light outweighs darkness? It's a question worth asking ourselves, a challenge worth taking on. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going.